The Saint Mort Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Saint Mort Show. I'm here with Jim Vorel. Oh, man, I murdered it in the beginning. It's okay, though. A writer for a few sites, but most importantly, PasteMagazine.com. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to have Jim on because, as most people know that listen to the show, I am a huge fan of shitty movies. The shittier, the better. And someone had shared me an article that Jim wrote about a month ago called The 100 Best B Movies of All Time. And I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to find out about some of these titles that I've never heard of and finally get a chance to discuss some of the ones that I do know and love with someone who is equally experienced with super shitty movies.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Now, before we start, can you give our listeners a rough idea of the definition you used for a B movie?
Yeah, and the title is on the article is the 100 best B movies of all time, but that's not really what I wanted to call it.
Okay.
To be perfectly honest, I mean that's just web speak, you know.
Yeah.
Title headlines have to be structured like that. What I called it was the 100 most entertaining B movies of all time. And that was my criteria for choosing them. I mean, because best could have meant the worst. It could have meant the actual objectively best. It could have meant a million different things.
Yeah, and I think that there's a big element. It's kind of weird because B movies, I mean, the origin of the name B movies is definitely long gone.
Yeah.
But
we don't have double bills anymore with two movies on an A and a B movie. You know, we just have cheap movies and then the ones that end up in wide release.
Exactly. So it definitely is. It's cool that term stuck around all these years, even though it doesn't technically apply properly anymore. Because also there's been a lot of B movies from those days that are actually masterpieces. I'm fairly certain, like Night of the Living Dead was a B movie.
Right. And I pretty much didn't include any of those ones that were really well known. Another thing I wanted the list to be was of largely less known films. I mean, I said in the introduction, John Carpenter's Halloween is like a spectacular example of a really great B movie because it's made super cheap. I mean, it was made unbelievably cheaply. It wasn't really in that wide a distribution. It became a huge hit, but that's a B movie all the way. But I mean, everybody's seen that movie, so what's the point of putting it on a list like this?
And I think that you also bring up a great point, is that like there's a thing about so bad that it's good, and I like that you specifically called out films like Manos, Hands of Fate, and Beasts of Yucca Flats, because yeah, no, you might think that they're so bad they're good because you've watched it with Mystery Science Theater 3000, but if you watch it without it, it is not a fun ride. Like,
in the comments of this, there's always going to be somebody calling for like a Manos, but that is not an entertaining movie. I'm sorry. I mean, there's nothing entertaining about Manos except for the first couple minutes of just saying, what the hell is happening? You know, it's not something you would ever want to sit down with your friends and just watch.
Exactly. And I will the episode the article will be linked inside the episode, so you can go through the list yourself and read his comments. I'm not going to go through all 100 because that would take all day, but I'm going to go through it in order and just grab certain ones, either ones that I've heard of but never got a chance to see, ones that absolutely I've never heard of and I'm curious about, or ones that I've seen and would love to discuss a little bit more. And right off the bat with number 10, you have The Giant Claw, which I have heard referred...
Number 100.
Yep, number 100. Oh yeah, we're starting from 100 up to 1. Which I have heard so many great, the worst looking monster of all time type thing, and I've yet to actually track it down.
Yeah, it's not the most riveting thing, but it's just the monster is so uniquely bad that it's like, how could anyone have thought that this was acceptable? I know standards were lower at the time, but I'm working on a piece right now that's about some of the most misleading posters. And there's one for the giant claw, and they specifically went out of their way to just show like the bird's ass sort of flying by. They don't show its face at all because they didn't even want to make like a caricature of it. It was so bad looking.
Yeah, it's I've seen the image of it so many times. I do eventually want to track that one down just to watch it. But I feel like
think it might be in public domain.
Probably. I just feel like it's probably not going to be as entertaining to watch as some of the other films later on in this list from that same drive-in period.
No, not quite.
And I don't want to. Obviously, like I said, we're not going one by one, but 99 is Hercules in New York, which when I briefly lived in Los Angeles, I had a group of friends that would do a Wednesday night movie night, kind of like a get over the hump day, let's all get together, drink beers, and watch a shitty movie. And the first movie I ever watched with them was, in fact, Hercules in New York, which is almost unbearable if it wasn't for how incredibly bad the dubbed voiceover is.
Yeah, were you watching the okay, so you were watching the dub. I think it's so much more interesting when you have the original Arnold Schwarzenegger lines when he didn't even know how to talk. I mean, and I don't mean it in any language at that point. He it's like he was not familiar with the idea of conversation.
Yeah, it's I would enjoy watching probably the undubbed one, but the dubbed one, it reminds me of something that I'm pretty sure pops up later on in this list, or at least I know a few Troma films pop up, but in the Toxic Avenger, there's this amazing thing throughout that movie where if the monster's mouth isn't shown on screen, his dubbed voice is very different than when he's talking and you can see his mouth moving. And I feel like that has a whole lot to do with just, it's too hard to sync it up for them. So they're
also,
just like
they just didn't care.
That probably too. But yes, and that's right. It's also I'm like reading the article as we're going along here, but he was credited as Mr. Arnold Strong, Mr. Universe in the credits, which is fantastic.
It's crazy how much earlier this movie is than his other films where he came into being a Hollywood star. I mean, this is like 10 years or more before he made Conan.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna jump ahead a few here, down to Prophecy at number 93, which I have made people watch a million different times for no other reason than one sequence, which you refer to specifically in the article as one of the silliest death scenes of all time. And it is you basically watch the whole movie strictly for that death scene and the chainsaw versus axe fight scene. And that's it. The movie doesn't make sense.
No, it's really not a very good movie. It's not a very entertaining movie either. It takes itself so seriously when it's not being absolutely ridiculous. That's the weird thing about it.
I remember being a kid walking through a video store and being so drawn to that cover of like the mutant bear fetus.
I think every kid had certain covers in like Blockbuster or whatever, that VHS covers that captivated them, and that they always wondered what that movie was about. And it's usually horror movies that they were never allowed to see. Like for me, I remember looking at the Hellraiser cover every single time and just wondering what the hell was going on with Pinhead.
Yeah, the most recent one for me, and I actually don't think let me know if this is in the list and I've forgotten, but until about a year ago, I'd always wanted to know what the movie Blood Beach was about.
I don't know that one.
Okay, Blood Beach, I finally was able to get a copy of it through VHS PS, which if I've said this a million times on the podcast, but I will always repeat it. If you are a connoisseur of B horror movies, you need to be visiting VHS PS. as regularly as possible, the VHS Preservation Society. The organization makes copies of VHS tapes that are currently out of print until they get a DVD or Blu-ray release, and then they take it off the website. Blood Beach had this cover that I always remembered, which was just a woman buried up to about her stomach in the sand with a look of terror on her face. And the tagline was, "Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, you can't get there."
Was the sand alive?
It was a killer clam that lived underneath the sand that was sucking people in.
Oh.
It
would have been better if the sand was just alive.
Yeah, just for no explainable reason, the sand was alive. That is probably that and The Prophecy are the two covers that always sat in my brain. And Netflix allowed me to see The Prophecy, but I had to go VHS PS to finally see Blood Beach. Right after The Prophecy is a movie that I've heard so much about, but have never actually watched. But it probably has the best title out of any movie on this list, which is
I agree.
Deathbed, the Bed That Eats.
And Patton Oswalt made this one famous with his stand-up routine. Even though he got the name wrong, he kept calling it Deathbed, the Bed That Eats People. But it's just the bed that eats. And it doesn't only eat people in the movie. This is a movie that's actually weirder than even weirder than you think it's going to be. It's just this grimy, sort of ugly 70s. I mean, it's so ugly. It has that dark, like nobody had any stage lights kind of look to it. But the bed just eats any random thing that's put on it. It's just this evil bed, and it's in some abandoned house. And kids go in there sometimes. People lay down on it. People get digested, but then other things get digested. Like there's a bottle of wine on it at one point. At one point, there's an entire bucket of like Colonel's chicken on there, and it gets digested. And then the bed, I shit you not, the bed gets indigestion. And there's like a bottle of Maalox also on the bed. And that soothes it.
So, I mean, is it safe to assume that the movie's played for laughs, or do you think that they were kind of being serious for most of it?
It's hard to tell. It waffles between being just really, really dry and boring, and then having these just WTF moments.
I definitely have to... I know you had mentioned that for a while it was on DVD. Do you know if it still is, or if that DVD's gone out of print?
Don't know. I'm sure there probably weren't too many of them to begin with.
Yeah, I'll have to check the old Amazon after this episode and see if it's there. So we're going to jump ahead to number 90, which is a movie that I almost completely disagree with its existence on the list at all, which is Sharknado. Yeah. A film that I was very late to the Sharknado bandwagon. And was kind of disappointed by the time I finally saw it, because I just felt like it wasn't bad enough. I don't know. I couldn't get into it. I thought it was mostly unwatchable. It does have the scene with the chainsaw towards the end is incredible, and there are a few moments that really are great, but. For the most part, I felt like it was basically Birdemic without the charm.
Ooh, that's an interesting way to describe a movie.
Well, because Birdemic, I mean, obviously not Birdemic 2, but Birdemic 1 had that genuine charm of not knowing, like the naivety of thinking that you were making something good. Whereas, like, Sharknado just oozes, they knew what they were making. Yes,
they did. And yeah, there's a lot of people who will get up in arms about anything that is like purposely cheesy being on a list like that. But unlike basically anything else from the Asylum, I found Sharknado legitimately entertaining because it's one of the few movies that they've ever done where they're actually giving you what they're claiming that they're going to give you. I mean, usually they just tease you and then don't have the resources to give you whatever it is they were claiming is going to happen. Sharknado is one of the few that does that. I actually just had an interview with the director a few days ago. I talked to him for like an hour, actually.
Nice. I mean,
Ferrante.
I will say that Sharknado 2's title is a strong runner for greatest title of all time.
Sharknado 2, the second one.
I also always liked the proposed title for the Troll 2 sequel, Troll 2 Part 2.
By the way, Deathbed, the Bed That Eats, appears to be on YouTube in its entirety.
Oh, well, then I know what I'm doing tonight as soon as we're done this interview. I want to jump over to 87 with a movie that I have never heard of, Ninja Terminator.
I take it you're not familiar with Godfrey Ho then.
No.
Oh boy. Yeah, this is some real Z grade stuff here. I mean, this is on a whole other level of incompetence for most of these movies. This is like the incompetence of a Coleman Francis or something, except it somehow still manages to be funny and watchable. Ho was this guy in it. They call him the Ed Wood of Hong Kong, and he would just take 2 or 3 complete movies and just chop them together and just take the action scenes out of one and put it in another one and then reuse the same footage from movies that he'd shot 10 years ago to try to make these people look like the main characters, and then you have all these separate sets of characters who never meet up, and it's absolutely ridiculous.
It's another one of those strong contenders for great title, because it literally just, I mean, I'm sure it was just like, hey, here's 2 words that have been doing pretty well in the cinema lately. Like, let's just stick them together.
That's exactly right. He directed 122 films, and most of them have the word ninja in the title.
Now, the very next one, 86, you kind of cheat there. You're technically 101 Best B movies, because you include both blobs at once, which I'm willing to make the argument that the 1988 Blob is probably, in my opinion, one of the best remakes in the horror in horror history. Yeah,
even though, I mean, it's one of those remakes that kind of redoes it in a different... You know what it's like? It's like John Carpenter's remake of The Thing.
Exactly. I think that you had that kind of cool, like, trio of 3 horror films in the 80s, all remaking 50s films in their own unique style. Because you had The Thing, The Fly, and The Blob.
Oh yeah, and all 3 of them turned up to like the gore and the. They took 3 kind of campy, the original Thing isn't that campy, but they took 3 kind of classic 50s sci-fi things and then just made them these bloodbaths with great practical effects, and the Thing still has probably my favorite practical effects of all time are probably in The Thing.
Well, and I think that the other, like you said, the Thing is an exception, but I think that that's a big thing of what makes a good horror remake that a lot of the modern ones haven't been doing is, don't bother with the movies that got it right the first time, but those ones that had a really cool premise that just may have been a little too cheesy or may not have been goofy enough, like take them and revisit them. I think that that's why... Like Fright Night, the remake, I think was awesome. I think that
I love the Fright Night remake.
Huge
fan of it.
It's amazing, and and I love the original Fright Night. But I think that in a lot of ways is superior. It almost takes what was already a smart movie and does it even smarter. And The Crazies, I think, is one of the most impressive modern remakes of all time, because I think that the original Crazies is boring as all hell. But the remake was well thought out. It made me care about a story that I hated. I just think that that's where you should be setting your sights, not trying to do Freddy again or Jason again, because we've seen that route a million times already. But I want to jump ahead to Piranha, which is another movie that I think had a really good remake recently with Piranha 3D.
Right. That definitely took it in the series in a different direction.
And I remember as a kid, this was one of the first horror movies I rented. And I because I was such a fan of Jaws, and the cover just captivated me. This ginormous piranha coming after a woman, and I hated it the first time I watched it. It wasn't until I was a little bit older and could appreciate the parody and the satire and the dark humor that I really liked what it was doing.
Yeah, this is the kind of movie that I went and watched eventually because I was a fan of Joe Dante's later movies.
Exactly. And I don't know if this one pops up on the list either, but I believe Prana was also written by John Stiles, correct?
I'm not sure.
I think it was, but he went on to do what I thought was an even better Jaws ripoff, Alligator.
It's just called Alligator.
Just Alligator, which I can't remember if that was on this list or not, but Alligator is, without a doubt, the one of the best Jaws ripoffs of all time.
Oh, you know what? I've seen this film, this poster before for Alligator.
Yeah. It has one of the most terrifying scenes I'd ever seen as a child, where a group of kids are at like a Halloween party, and it's two kids dressed like pirates and one kid's dressed like a cowboy, and they have his arms and legs tied up, and this kid's like 5 years old. And they're walking him out to the pool, and they're like, "We're gonna make you walk the plank," and he's like, "Oh no," and they like walk him out on the diving board, and then just as they push him, the mom comes out and is like, "Hey kids, get away from that pool," and she turns on the light in the pool, and the light pops on, and the alligator's got his mouth open right under the diving board, and the little kid falls in, and the pool just fills up with blood. And it's like, they even talk about on the commentary track, they're like, "You're not supposed to kill a kid." Like, that's, like, you really you lose a lot of people when you kill a 5-year-old in your horror movie for no reason.
Yeah, you get a lot of instant walkouts for that.
Now, I have to ask why, of all the Leprechaun films, you feel Leprechaun 3 is the best one.
Okay, I've had this conversation before.
Because I would say I think 3 is a good movie, but I actually think 2 is the best one.
2. I like the setting. I just think that the humor hits the right its zenith here, and it's got some great practical effects too. Like the whole thing with the television that like comes to life, and it's like a robot. Remember that?
Yeah.
But more so than anything, the fact that in this one, when he bites a guy, the guy starts slowly turning into a leprechaun. Like it's just it's like the lycanthropy gene or something, you know. And he goes down to the casino kitchen, and he starts ordering just a million different kinds of potatoes.
Okay, I think I need to revisit Leprechaun 3. Because I don't remember too much. I just remember it was like, oh, it was Leprechaun in Vegas. Yeah,
the protagonist is turning into one, so naturally he has to go eat a bunch of different kinds of potatoes from the... He goes down there, and he's got a bad Irish accent that he's faking. It's like, potato skin, give me a potato pancake.
I do want to call out the next movie, The Beast of 20,000 Fathoms. There's really not much to say about it beyond it's just a genuinely great movie, especially from the standpoint of if you're a fan of stop motion.
Yeah, and especially from the standpoint of when you're looking at it with historical context. Like, if you showed up to a movie theater in 1953 to see this, it would have blown your goddamn mind.
Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. Now one of my all-time favorites, at 77, you have Basket Case.
Ooh.
Which is just mind-blowing how low budget that movie actually is.
And he kind of annoying at times, but...
and going from a movie with incredible stop motion to a movie with possibly some of the worst stop motion sequences ever created.
Yeah.
And I actually even enjoy the sequels because they have their own weird, bizarre charm of them living in a house that's like a home for freaks.
I have never actually seen the sequel so far.
The third one is really, really bizarre. The second one is just kind of bizarre. But it literally takes place right where the first movie ends. Like, the movie starts with him falling.
Right.
But they're both...
Yeah, I have heard that, yeah.
Yeah, and they're both okay. But they they get kidnapped from the hospital by an old woman who basically runs a foster home for freaks, and it's just them walking through this home. Like, the whole movie takes place in the home with this variety of bizarre and interesting characters, and the budget is much higher, so the makeup effects and special effects are a little bit more impressive. And then the sequel is about the brother that's just ahead having babies with another female head.
He finds a female head.
He finds a female head, and they have babies together.
That's a 1,000,000 to 1 shot.
Yeah, it's a touching love story. Now this one I'm kind of shocked at how low it is on the list. Is 75 with the robot monster. Which was another one of those films that I would watch very frequently with a group of friends because it's a quick one. It's only like an hour and 5 minutes.
Yeah. That is like. It's like eating a warm bowl of oatmeal. It's just so bland and inoffensive. The whole gorilla suit, space helmet creature is literally probably the most iconic idea of like a bad movie. Yeah, it's like the most iconic like picture of like a bad movie monster.
Right behind the giant claw, as discussed earlier.
But the robot monster is much more well known.
Yes, very much so. And right after that, one of my legit favorite movies, Poultrygeist: The Night of the Chicken Dead. Probably the best, and possibly will always be the best film Troma's ever made from a filmmaking standpoint.
And now that I'm looking at it at 74, I could have put this one higher on the list. It is a weirdly good movie. But you keep kind of, I mean, like, even the music is like well written and well performed.
The music's really I have the soundtrack. When I do San Diego Comic-Con, our booth is always right next to Troma's booth. And every year we help them out, and they reward us by letting us take one free thing from their stock. And the year that I saw that they had the Poultrygeist soundtrack, that I knew right away that was my my free gift for that year.
Yeah, I might have taken that too, actually.
The songs are still really catchy, even out of the context of the movie. And the movie is, I mean, say what you will about Troma Pictures, they've always been, their in-house movies have always had a nice little mix of satire in their obnoxious, over-the-top style.
These movies are like the kind of things where you can only watch them with certain friends of yours.
Exactly.
Like, if your friend, you need to know in advance, is this the kind of person who can handle the projectile diarrhea scene?
I was that douchebag in college that would frequently have people over to watch blood-sucking freaks. And it was a good way of narrowing down who my real friends were. And really, again, this movie could have been way, way higher because you do rank Ginger Dead Man as the next in line. And Ginger Dead Man is pretty unwatchable.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. It reminds me of another movie that I didn't put on the list, but Jack Frost, the Killer Snowman movie.
I love Jack Frost, and I love the sequel to Jack Frost where he's in Hawaii. Because where else would you put a killer snowman?
Naturally, it's like did he run into the Saved by the Bell cast when he was there too?
Well, it's kind of like in my background right now. I have Jaws the Revenge on.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I always like to have something on the television that is somewhat related to the discussion at hand. Okay, so I don't know how to pronounce this movie's name. But literally, when I saw the screenshot for this movie, it freaked me out. At 67, Mr. Sardonicus?
Sardonicus, yes.
Sardonicus. What the fuck is Mr. Sardonicus? Because I like William Castle, and that is one of the most ghastly faces I've ever seen.
I know. It really is disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that it's kind of a retelling of The Man Who Laughs. And that is a way more terrifying look than The Man Who Laughs.
Yeah, he's in some kind of accident, and it just freezes his face like that, and he has to cover it up most of the time. apparently the actual prosthetics for that were so painful for him to wear that he could only wear it for like 45 minutes, an hour at a time. So they had to shoot all of his scenes like in chunks because you can tell just looking at it that it looks incredibly like painful.
Yeah, and I'm reading on your thing right here just William Castle is the showman, the end-all showman.
I have a great appreciation for William Castle. There's no one like him today. Except for maybe Lloyd Kaufman.
Yeah, but Lloyd doesn't get the major releases that I think Castle used to be able to pull off.
Yeah.
My love of I always did I enjoyed the William Castle movies that I had seen, but it definitely wasn't until I was a little older that I saw the movie Matinee, bringing it back to Joe Dante, which is basically just a love letter to William Castle, and that was kind of what led me down the road of doing research on Castle.
Yeah, his whole idea of gimmicks driving the picture. He's just this lovable weirdo. Mr. Sardonicus's gimmick was that they had this punishment poll at the end of the movie where the people in the audience would be supposed to vote on if he would be further punished or get off on his crimes. And of course, Castle, when he appeared, would just basically tell the audience to convict him and kill him. And apparently, he claimed that there was two endings, but other people have said that there was never another ending, a mercy ending. It was never filmed.
And we won't talk too much on this one because it's just a great movie that you should see. It has a few slow points in it, but he also did number 60, The Tingler, which is just a genuinely fun film from the 60s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah, like if you can't appreciate something like The Tingler today, then you have become completely desensitized to like classic cinema, like the way that the beats of classic cinema work. If you need Transformers smashing through buildings all the time, then
riding dinosaurs,
right? The Tingler is just not going to offer anything for you.
Now, what might offer something to you is 59, which I've never heard of. Sorority Babes in the Slime Ball Bowl-orama. Another strong competitor for best title.
Yeah, that's another.
List.
That's David Decato.
And I'm just drawn to this by the screenshot of this creepy little creature guy.
I had so much trouble finding a shot of him. Of that little like troll thing.
It looks like a low budget version of the guy from Trilogy of Terror.
Yeah, the fetish.
Yes. Is there anything interesting you could tell me about Sorority Babes in the Slime Ball Bowl-orama that would make me want to see it even more so than its title?
It's kind of a USA Up All Night kind of sex exploitation type movie where they just kind of slapped the sort of like horror elements into it, but it's really just kind of an excuse to do a Porky's type thing, My favorite thing about writing that entry was the Wikipedia person who had written, quote, "This proved to be one of the best spanking scenes in mainstream film and helped the film become a cult favorite. Citation needed."
Now, lower down list, and you did a pretty good job with these 100 films of really trying to avoid too many Mystery Science Theater 3000 films.
Yeah, you know what I did is I went through because I love Mystery Science Theater. It's my favorite show of all time. I went through a list of all the episodes and I picked out the movies that were good on their own, and then I pared those down. Which
leads me to 53, and I just recently saw this episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000, Future War.
I love this episode.
Oh my god! Just the dinosaur, the dinosaur alone, for how tiny and shitty it is, but how brilliant the actors are at looking genuinely terrified every time it comes on the screen.
I love how the size of them just varies so wildly. Like sometimes the dinosaurs are like the size of a dog, and sometimes they're like the size of a building.
And yet there's I think sometimes Mystery Science Theater 3000, the greatest moments in that show are the smallest little details. And for me, I have a very distinct memory of Future War that I'll probably carry with me for years to come. But it's just a simple scene of when two characters are talking and they're eating. And the whole scene, they're just making the noises of them chewing the food. And it's stupid, but so great.
It's when there's they call it the halfway house for huge guys.
Yes.
That's like my favorite sequence of the movie, when you just have all these huge people just kind of walking around the kitchen eating food, and they're
all they're commentating is just
pass me the gravy, butter.
And then right after that, you've got one of the movies that I've tortured many of friends to watch, Mac and Me, at 52.
That's a movie that everyone should see to understand where we almost went in terms of like marketing tie-ins. Because if Mac and Me had been successful, if it had been a big hit, we would be like in Idiocracy today, where like every movie would just be an extended commercial, even more so than the Transformers movies are.
Well, and the freaky thing with Mac and Me, for me, is that I saw it as a child and had no idea that it was bad. Like, it was like that, to me, it was just like, this is a great movie, says 4-year-old Matt Kelly. But, like, I unironically tracked that movie down because I remembered loving it as a kid. And it felt like, I'm about to sound like a little bit of a hipster for a second, but like, I was into Mac and Me before the rest of the world remembered that this movie was a thing. Mm-hmm. Because I just always remembered the cover of the little kid with this alien thing on his head, like piggyback riding him. And I didn't remember stuff like the wheelchair going down the cliff or anything like that. So rewatching it,
I just can't believe that happens in a movie.
That happens in a movie, and Paul Rudd, in his complete brilliance, has continued to show it as often as he possibly can.
On Conan.
I love that we live in a world where one of the top actors in the world wants to continually raise awareness that Mac and Me is a thing.
Yeah.
So let's.
If you're gonna watch anything from that movie, I mean the McDonald's, the whole McDonald's scene really just sums up the whole film. The 5-minute McDonald's dance sequence, where it's just Ronald McDonald just beatboxing and break dancing while people shove fries in their face.
And the bear dances, and no one finds that weird. Yes, that movie is a perfect representation of what was constantly happening at McDonald's all across America.
Any given McDonald's.
At 48, you have Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, which is the only Silent Night, Deadly Night movie I don't own. Because I already own Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 1, which is about 89% of this movie.
Yeah.
And I can just watch Garbage Day on YouTube and feel like I've seen everything that needs to be seen in Part 2.
I honestly don't have a terrible lot to add about Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2.
Except for Garbage Day. I mean, that's...
Garbage Day, his whole, just him walking around town. There's rarely been actors who are so ill-equipped to do a feature film as he appears to be in that movie.
A little lower, at 46, you have Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which has always been one of my favorite movies. And it was the first movie to actually give me a nightmare as a kid. I remember finding it on television, which, based on when it came out and when I was born, I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. And I wasn't freaked out by the clowns, but the knock my block off scene scared the living shit out of me as a kid.
And I didn't get to watch all these things as a kid. This was not my childhood.
I had a childhood that for about a year and a half, Cinemax was a thing, and working parents was a thing. So having the ability to turn on the TV and accidentally see stuff like this was very frequent at a young age. But yeah, that movie, I remember it stuck with me, and then when I was in high school and I had gotten back into watching horror movies, I really went out of my way to track down that movie to see it again.
For someone who doesn't like clowns, it is pretty much the ultimate.
It really, and it's so funny, and it's so charming, and it's really kind of sad that the Chiodos brothers have really just stuck to special effects since that film, because it's not a poorly made movie at all.
They've never produced something as compelling again.
No,
not in any of their work doing effects or whatever.
I'm trying to skim through. What do we got here? Let's talk about... Okay, so I have yet to see this movie, and it's been brought up a few times in my life because I'm a hardcore wrestling fan. Hell Comes to Frogtown with Roddy Piper.
Yeah. And Donald G. Jackson, the director, he went on to make some other incredibly crazy films. I mean, you would see Hell Comes to Frogtown and assume that it's the craziest movie that this guy could have made, but it was just the beginning for him.
Well, one of my favorite things about when I first heard about Hell Comes to Frogtown, which was only recently, recording a review of They Live for a different podcast, someone had mentioned if I had seen it, which I hadn't, and I was looking into it, and the part that I enjoyed the most was finding out that Roddy Piper's last name is in fact Hell, so the name
Max
is
Hell.
like a really shitty pun in its own title.
Yeah, it's this ugly, like, really sexual movie too. I mean, just everything in the movie's about sex. Just trying to get. He's like the only virile guy left, and so everybody needs to like score with Roddy Piper, including the frog people, by the way.
So a little bit lower on the list, we get to 34, which you have Class of Nukem High, which is really not... It's probably my least favorite of the Lloyd Kaufman Trauma films. I'm kind of curious why that one stuck out to you as one to put onto the list.
I guess it's just the 80s-ness. I love all their riffs on like fashion and everything,
Yeah.
It reminds me of I'm sure you've seen Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors.
Yes.
Like, I always loved, like, when they go into, like, their fantasy world and everything, there's that one girl who's, like, the tough one, and she just gets the most ridiculous 80s treatment where she gets, like, the giant mohawk and, like, all the leather, just like the guy in the picture is wearing here.
Well, and know what movie I just saw for the first time about a year ago, and I appreciated it because I had seen Class of Nukem High, which I assume it was kind of a parody of, was The Class of 1984.
I have not seen that one. It's on my list. I have never just gotten around to it. And then there's Class of 1999, right?
Yeah, Class of 1984 is not a great movie, but it's a fun movie in the sense of like looking at it from a perspective of how 80s could this movie, like how 80s could this film look, and then watching it and going, I'm really, like, obviously the name alone, but I'm very sure that Lloyd Kaufman was purposely trying to capture the same type of characteristics in Nukem High, but just traumatize it.
Yes.
So Class of 1984 almost plays out like Class of Nukem High if you removed all of the mutations and toxic waste and monsters from it and just had a film about a bunch of punk kids in a school.
Yeah, and Class of Nukem High really is like establishes like the Traumaville universe in terms of what you can expect to happen anytime something is set in Traumaville.
Very true. I guess that does take the Traumaville of Toxic Avenger and expand it even more so. Now at 31, you have The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, which I think is probably one of the greatest tributes to the classic B movies.
Yeah, and incredibly underseen.
it's shamefully underseen. It's one of the things that I really loved about that movie from the first time I saw it was that while yes, it knew what it was, it still made sure that it felt authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that the camera quality is a little bit better, you could easily trick someone into believing that Lost Skeleton of Cadavra was a lost film from the 50s, which was how it was originally advertised.
Yeah. The first time I ever heard of Larry Blamire, I had never heard of him before. And I was just randomly flipping around in, I think it was like Comcast's On Demand, section, just looking at all the genre movies. And there's one called Trail of the Screaming Forehead.
Yes.
Said, what the hell is this?
I saw a clip from it, and I never knew if the movie got finished or not.
No, it got finished.
Oh,
and so
man.
I watched it, and I was like, it was just so strange. It was half the jokes were really funny, and the other half were so groan-inducing. And I just barely got through it, but it made me curious, and I started reading about the guy, and I found out he was much better known for a few of these other movies. So I've watched now just about everything that he's done, and Lost Skeleton of Cadavra is still his masterpiece, but I also really liked the one that was earlier on the list, Dark and Stormy Night, which is like his parody of old dark house movies and whodunits.
So you don't recommend the Crawling Foreheads, though?
No, I do not.
Okay.
If you're gonna watch a Larry Blamire movie, just watch the Lost Skeleton of Cadavra and start off that way. He's working on the third one right now.
I know. I did not know about it until I read your article and then saw that he was going to be crowdsourcing it soon, and that made me very excited. I'm jumping way ahead now to number 14 with Thanksgiving, a film that I want to say has to be seen to believe, but now that I've seen Thanksgiving 3, I know that that is in fact the movie that needs to be seen to be believed.
That one's so wrong when they tried it.
The fact that the plot line is that Thanksgiving 3 is about them searching for Thanksgiving 2 alone.
That part I like.
Yeah, the rest of the movie where it's all puppets and one like normal actor is very bizarre.
Yeah, it is absolutely like it's almost crazy to think, and it's a compliment to how ambitious these people were as filmmakers, that when they just sat down and said, let's make a Thanksgiving 2, they didn't decide to just make the same movie again. They could have easily made the same movie again.
And that's what I like about that movie. I definitely think that Thanksgiving 1 is way more entertaining, but Thanksgiving 3 is, if nothing else, it kind of falls in that same category of like, as much as you hate Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, you have to respect that they didn't just rehash the same movie twice.
God, I love the scene in Nightmare on Elm Street 2 with the bird, the exploding parakeet. This
is the second time I've had to tell a guest to see this movie if they haven't. But if you haven't taken the 4.5 hours to sit down and watch Never Sleep Again, the documentary about Nightmare on Elm Street, you are doing yourself a disservice.
Well, I will have to put that on. 4.5 hours? Are you kidding me?
4.5 hours. They collected pretty much every person who had anything to do with any Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and sat down with them and had them talk. They basically were like, you can be absolutely honest about your opinion on the movie, why you think the movie sucks, why you think the movie's great. And the coverage on Freddy's Revenge is probably the most interesting chunk of the movie, because
they're probably talking about the gay subtext and everything.
They talk about the gay subtext, and they finally reveal that the writer of the movie was gay, and the set dresser was gay, and the lead actor was gay.
That'll do it.
And they said, like, the three of us kind of were like, hey, we know what we're doing here, but let's not let anyone else in on it, essentially. Like, even the director wasn't totally aware, but the writer and the actor and the set dresser made sure to have all these little hints hidden throughout the movie and little like winks and nods. They talk about that bird scene and how it was supposed to be like this giant mutant half Freddy half bird creation, but the puppet looks so shitty that they were just like, all right, just put this bird on a string and swing it around a little bit.
I love it. It flies around. It just starts freaking out in its cage. Right, so it flies around the room. It explodes into a rain of feathers, and then the father, it immediately cuts from that to the father banging around like behind the stove, looking for like a gas leak, and the kid's like, I don't think it's a gas leak, and so then he just turns on the kid, and it's the most unreasonable parent versus child thing, where he accuses him because what'd you use, firecracker? I'll tell you what he did. He used a goddamn cherry bomb. Like he just somehow lit a cherry bomb and then just inserted it inside the living parakeet in full view of everyone.
It's great. That documentary made me appreciate that movie and Freddy's Dead on levels I never knew I would appreciate. Especially Freddy's Dead, which I frequently hear is referred to as one of the worst horror sequels of all time. Mm-hmm. And then you watch the documentary and you find out that, like, oh, everybody who worked on that movie is from John Waters' camp of filmmaking. And that they were going out of their way to make a John Walters-style Freddy movie. And then it's like, well, now it's kind of interesting to watch it with that in mind and really how it embraces the campiness of the whole film.
The video game portion.
Yeah, the video game portion, the eardrum portion, which kind of is a freaky-ass way to die. But let's jump down another one to 13, Return of the Living Dead, which kind of ties in with the, Class Nukem High hyper 80s element. And this
is among the most 80s movies ever made.
And I would go as far as to say I consider this the greatest zombie movie ever made. And I also think, and you called it out in here, but the coolest looking zombie ever as well.
Yes. Yeah, Tarman is the best.
I actually have the first action figure I ever bought to start my addictive action figure collection was a Tarman action figure. And it's a pretty cool little, it always draws attention sitting on the DVD shelf.
This movie holds up so well when you watch it today.
And it's still funny. The special effects hold up, the story holds up, the comedy holds up. And it really does a great way of... It in my opinion, does something that's kind of cool, is that it's, much like Shaun of the Dead, it's a parody of a genre that also expands upon the genre, and is...
Right, it introduced... before this, nobody had ever thought about zombies as having anything to do with brains.
Yeah.
And then that became a trope of the entire genre to the point where most people don't even know... there's a lot of people who think that, Romero zombies eat brains.
Yeah, I actually got into a fight with someone at Bar Trivia one time. It was the week of Halloween, and the question was, we were supposed to name the movie for the different questions, and the one question was, these zombies crave brains, and I said, Return of the Living Dead. And he said, no, Night of the Living Dead, and I actually pulled out my phone, and I was like, no, you're wrong. And, you do not want to fight with me with this, sir.
Now, I do not recommend watching any of the sequels to Return of the Living Dead.
Return of the Living Dead 2, I feel like is the best of them, quote unquote, question mark.
It annoys the hell out of me.
It's just like, hey, let's remake it, but make it PG-13. So here, okay, I'm going to jump ahead to a movie that I'm kind of... You have this on here at number 7, The Crippled Avengers, which I've never seen, but I was expecting you to have. There's another one, Crippled Masters, which involves a ninja who has no legs and a ninja who has no arms joining forces.
That one's like freak show interesting, but but it's not entertaining anything like Crippled Avengers is one of the best straight up martial arts movies ever. One of the best Hong Kong Shaw Brothers martial arts movies because it just has such well-defined characters, You immediately recognize everybody. You're like, oh, that's the guy who's blind and he can fight like this, and that's the guy who got his legs cut off and he's got metal legs now. And there's the guy who got deafened, and then they turn one guy into a, quote, an idiot by putting his head in a vice. So he just becomes like this kind of drooling, silly guy. He's the most acrobatic of the group. It's such a well balanced movie, and the fight scenes are amazing.
All right, well then I will have to put that on the
You
list.
will be thoroughly entertained by Crippled Avengers.
There's not much to discuss.
If you love classic martial arts movies.
I've been trying to get into them. Literally the only one I own in my life right now is Crippled Masters, so I need to expand on it a little bit.
Can I mention number 10, She Woke Up Pregnant?
I go ahead, yeah, I kind of skimmed over that one, but that is another one with a pretty solid title.
Yeah, it's an amazing title, isn't it? I do these themed bad movie nights. That's how I've seen a lot of these. I have people over here. We watch a bunch of movies in the course of a night. We'll watch 4 or 5 movies late into the night, on some kind of theme. One of the nights we did was Lifetime movies, and I went out looking for the most egregious and crazy out there Lifetime films. I mean, we did one where it was Fred Savage right after the Wonder Years as an abusive boyfriend who beats up DJ Tanner from Full House. But this was the best one. And this one is this woman. She goes under the gas at the dentist office, and then she wakes up pregnant. And they're like, "What could have happened?" But nobody believes her. It's one of those she has to take on the whole system, and it is so melodramatic. Her husband doesn't believe her. Everyone just assumes that she was having an affair with somebody or having an affair with the dentist. That the dentist just says she came on to me.
That's awesome.
So eventually they have to do a sting. Where they send in a pretty female officer undercover to sit in his chair. See if she wakes up pregnant as well. Yeah, to sit in the chair and get gassed, and then he tries to go for it, and they have to storm in and take him down. It is so wonderfully melodramatic. I mean, Lifetime movies. I honestly, that was one of our best movie nights. They just go down so easily. They're great popcorn, melodrama. It's this is the melodrama version of Crippled Avengers as an action movie.
Well, actually, as I'm looking at your top 10, and I want to avoid going through all 10 of them because I do want people to go through the article and read about some of these themselves. But it almost seems like the top 10 seems to almost be like a roundup of and here is the best Kung Fu B movie, and here is the best, horror B movie with... Yeah,
that's kind of what I was trying to do.
I mean, I don't want to talk too much about the movie because it's such a great movie that if you haven't seen it, just go see it. But 6 for Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon.
And that's the last one on the list that's a legitimately good movie.
Yeah, it is. It is a great, witty, smart film, and probably was the most intelligent horror comedy recently until about a year or two when we had Cabin in the Woods and Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah.
And then we hop into where we start to get So Bad It's Great, Troll 2.
Yeah.
Which, the first guest that I have ever had on this podcast was, in fact, George Hardy, who was there to promote Best Worst Movie and Ghost Shark 2 Urban Jaws.
Yeah.
Most people have seen the movie. They know it's a masterpiece, but I do applaud you for not going with the cliched favorite scene, because the trip to the general store is fantastic.
Yeah, that guy, if you've never heard the legend, there's this scene where they go to the general store, and there's this insanely creepy shopkeep who gives them the warm milk that they all drink in town, the warm, chunky milk. But apparently this guy was just on a day trip from a local insane asylum. He was just out to visit family, and they were just "Hey, you want to be in the movie and have a large speaking part?" And he just looks so unhinged, he's just going to leap over the counter and just bite their face off.
Yeah, he's the most believable thing in the movie, really. He's the only person that looks like he poses a real threat throughout the entire film.
We watched this recently, and when he first came onto screen, I paused it to explain that story, and everyone was just looking at his face and screaming.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. He is one of the many highlights of that film. That film has so many various moments of pure greatness that it's almost impossible not to love every damn minute of it. Now I want to skip ahead. Samurai Cop I've never seen.
You have not seen Samurai Cop.
But the title and the photo make me realize that I've made a huge mistake in my life.
Yes, everyone needs to see Samurai Cop. Amir Shervan, the director, this Iranian guy, he made like 3 or 4 movies that are basically like this. Where they're just these like... They're just like he's watched a couple 80s cops movies, and he's like, I could do that. And so he just finds these random like beach bums and decides to make a movie. And Robert Zadar shows up again.
We touched on it a little bit, but Birdemic is much like Troll 2. There is just so much going on in that movie that makes it incredible. But the most incredible part of the movie is how long it takes for the Birdemic to actually occur in the movie.
I remember the first time... In fact, Birdemic was the first movie we ever watched in that movie series. And I remember as the movie dragged on, we kept saying, I can't believe there had not been any birds so far.
Not a single bird. But from the first second you watch that movie... by the end of that film, you will never get the song hanging out with my family, having ourselves a party out of your head. It is probably the most catchy song out of anything on this list, including the songs of Poultrygeist.
No, I think the catchiest songs on this list are in Miami Connection.
Okay, I'll have to check that one out as well. And now we're getting to the last two, which I've never seen either of them in their entirety. I saw many clips of The Room and know pretty much the entire plot, but I've never forced myself to sit through the entire film.
The Room is eminently watchable.
Yeah,
it's not hard to watch by any.
Well, I've met and hung out with Tommy Wiseau on 2 different occasions, and I can categorically say that the man is in fact an alien wearing human skin, because he does not think, speak, or understand things on the same level as the rest of the world.
Where did you meet him?
He was the guest on a friend's podcast when I was living in Los Angeles, and then was signing autographs at our booth at San Diego Comic-Con a couple weeks later. My biggest memory of him was we asked him what his inspiration was. And I shit you not, his answer was, I inspire me. I strive to make myself impressed with what I do. Also, 101 Dalmatians. And it was just like, what is happening? And
have you read The Disaster Artist?
No, I want to so badly.
It's a good read, and it really explains a lot. Finally, I mean, after so long of wondering so many of these things, it puts you into his headspace. I mean, like Greg Sestero was so close to him during this period, and he's really the only one who was close to him in the few years leading up to before he made The Room. So you can finally see what pushed him to make the movie, you know?
I imagine The Disaster Artist, in a weird way, might also have elements of, like, the B-movie version of the Jaws logs.
That's the one that's about all the stuff that went horribly wrong on the set of Jaws?
Yes. And it's a great read. It's way more entertaining than Peter Benchley's book, Jaws, which is pretty bad.
The Disaster Artist, reading his actual stuff about filming the movie itself will make you amazed that the film got finished.
Okay. I mean, my other big Tommy Wiseau thing that I'll always remember is we had asked him, we were like, you're a bit of a ladies' man. Do you have any tips for some of the geeks out there trying to get ladies? And this was a kind of getting close to like New Year's Eve, or like what are you gonna do for New Year's Eve? And he's like, what I say is get 2 girls and some drinks with a little something extra and see what happens.
What is a little something extra?
And that was like, there was that moment where we're like, did he just recommend people date rape someone as their New Year's Eve celebration? So yeah, he is something else. And now the movie that I have seen so many clips from and don't know why I haven't just sat down and watched it, because it looks like the greatest film ever made. Your number one pick, Hard Ticket to Hawaii.
Yeah, I think this one probably surprised some people because it's not as well known as something like The Room, obviously. Andy Sidaris is a fascinating portrait of a filmmaker. He had won Emmy Awards earlier in his career. He had produced like Wild World of Sports, and he'd even produced an Olympics on TV. He had done all this sports stuff, and so he retires in middle age and decides, I'm going to direct me some films. It turns out the kind of films that he likes are like the most macho 80s stuff, like 80s action pictures imaginable. Just so cliched, so cheesy, and so misogynistic that it blows your mind. They were all on USA Up All Night or Cinemax. And this was the third one that he made. He made 12 of these types of movies. They call it the Bullets, Bombs, and Babes series. And this is probably the best one.
Yeah, because this is the one that has like the inflatable sex doll, skateboard assassin, and the razor blade frisbees, and all the other.
There's so
great
much
clips
in here that defies explanation, and there's so much nudity. It is unbelievable. Like it's so shameless. It's some of the most shameless nudity you'll ever see in a movie. There's a part where the 2 main characters are these undercover women, and they're both former Playboy playmates or penthouse pets. That's how he cast all of his movies. And they have got this package of this little like box that they've taken off of like a drug dealer, and they say, let's get in the hot tub. I do my best thinking there. And so there's a scene of them getting into the hot tub nude, opening the box to check it out, seeing those diamonds in there, and then they just get back out of the hot tub and leave. The whole scene lasts like 25 seconds. It's just one more random tit shot.
So here's we've reached the end of the list. I know that I personally have a few films that I would be like, I can't believe this wasn't on there. And I'm sure that through this list you've gotten more than a fair share of internet critics saying, what about this movie and what about this movie? Has there been any films that someone had mentioned that you had never seen or heard of and then tracked down and were blown away by how fun it was? There
are ones. I haven't tracked down a lot of the stuff yet, but I have. Well, I guess I have. I haven't watched a lot of them yet, but I've made notes of a lot of the things people mentioned in the comments. Because people made a lot of the suggestions in the comments, and there were a lot of people who were bringing up things. Occasionally, ones that I realized I should have included. One of the most notable ones that I should have included, but just slipped my mind at the time, was Story of Ricky O.
Yeah, Ricky O is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that should have been in there.
The ones that popped into my mind were definitely The Apple. And
I have not seen The Apple.
Okay.
People have told me about this movie before. I have not seen it.
And one of my personal favorite horror films, slasher films, whatever, Sleepaway Camp.
Okay.
Which is just, I mean, I'm at the point where I've seen that movie so many times that I'm a firm believer that everyone needs to experience Sleepaway Camp with me sitting there pointing out all of the insanity that is happening in the background of scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever follow up on the guy who claimed that he wrote part of the Deathbed screenplay?
No, I was not able to get in touch with him. And he said that he was unaware that that's what it was. So that made me even more curious about what he was talking about.
I mean, were you at least able to confirm that is in fact the person?
No. Somebody suggested a movie called Amok Train that I sounds really interesting to me.
I will say that I forgot to mention this. But we were talking a lot about Thanksgiving earlier, and I did see that one of the people who worked on Thanksgiving even commented.
Yeah, there's been a
article.
lot more of those in the last couple weeks. It's like these people have. One of the ones that I was most proud of was Scott Shaw from the Rollerblade 7.
Nice.
Showing up.
But I was going to say that the coolest thing about Thanksgiving for me was actually when I first saw the movie, I tracked it down. I went to their website, and they had a really cool concept behind. They had a really cool concept behind their filmmaking, which was that they feel like independent filmmakers need to be helpful towards each other, and we shouldn't be battling against each other. So they had a whole thing set up on their page to explain exactly how they got Thanksgiving into Best Buys and on Netflix, and they walked you through the step-by-step process so that any filmmaker could follow their process and get their movie in video stores and on Netflix without having to sell their product to a distributor. And I was like, that's really cool. Like, that is like a genuinely awesome thing to do. Is like, we found a way to do this, and instead of keeping it as our little secret, we want to share it with other people.
It's actually helpful.
Yeah. But yeah, Sleepaway Camp, it would be a dream to have the star of Sleepaway Camp on the podcast. She had done a convention with me a while ago, so I definitely need to get her on there. But to sum up Sleepaway Camp in one scene of its cheesiness and its bizarreness, is that there is a sequence where the actor who was hired to play the cop had a full-grown mustache. And then he shaved the mustache, and they needed him for reshots. So their solution is just electrical tape underneath his nose, and the reshot is a close-up. So he walks out, and there's just clear as day electrical tape on his face.
Did they color it like it was hair?
No, just 2 pieces of electrical tape. Just taped under his nose. That's it.
You know, another Samurai Cop thing. Samurai Cop has basically the same thing. You see that guy's hair in that photo. How awesome it is. How Pantene Pro V it is.
Yeah.
He cut his hair afterward, but then they needed more. They needed more shots. So like, there's random scenes in it of him wearing this big bulky wig that looks nothing like the hair. You can see immediately when they cut between. It's like it'll be during the middle of an action scene, and you'll be like, "Wig, okay, not wig." Oh, there's the wig again.
We have my roommate and I write scripts together, and we actually took our company's name from a sequence in Sleepaway Camp. But we're working on our first feature film right now, and as a slight tribute to the movie, we've been joking around about the opening of the film just being the words "To Mom a Doer," because that's the first thing that appears on the screen before the movie starts. And you look at that and you're like, well, that's weird. And then you watch the whole movie and you're like, why would you dedicate this movie to your mom? Like, it makes no sense to be like, you know who would love this film? Mom.
Mom.
Well, thank you so much, James, for allowing me to dissect and critique your writing for an hour and 15 minutes.
Well, it was a good excuse to talk about all these again. So
now, if people want to follow more of your work, is Paste Magazine kind of your main location, or is there some other work all over the webs?
Well, I work for a daily newspaper. That's my real job, but I contribute quite a bit to Paste, so that's probably the main place to see it.
All right,
I have my series there of Drek and Drink, where it's like a bad movie or a B movie and craft beer pairing column. It's a once a month thing. My last one was Poultrygeist and a beer called Against the Grain Kentucky Fried Chicken.
We never got around to producing it. We recorded one episode and it didn't go as beautifully as I had hoped it would. but there was a point where we were going to do a podcast because I'm completely straight edge, and then I have a friend who drinks nonstop and another friend who's a pothead. And the idea was that we were going to do a show called The Movies and the Munchies, where we would all watch the same movie at the same time, me stone sober, the other one totally drunk, and the other one taking a bong hit every, 10 minutes, and then record a podcast afterwards of us discussing the movie to see if we had different experiences with what we had just watched because of our altered states, or me being totally just fine.
And that didn't work out.
It just became a little too tedious after a while, because it was just like we would get to the point where we'd record and I was the only one that was talking because I was the only one that retained anything about the movie.
Yeah, you were gonna moderate.
Yeah,
you were inevitably going to be the moderator for that.
But we did get a pretty cool theme song out of it, so I keep trying to find a way to use that theme song for something else. But that, again, thank you so much, James.
Yeah, my pleasure.
If you ever do another one of these top 10 lists, I would love to do this again, like a month after it comes out, go over it and dissect.
All right, well, we'll see if they ever assign me another huge one like that. This was a lot of work, this one.
Yeah,
it was a long process.
If it happens again and you need someone to take a bulk of it and split it 50-50, I will happily hop up and force myself through 50 pieces of shit for the sake of science.
I'll keep that in mind.
All right, have a good one, James.
Yep, you too.